Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leon Weinstein, and you are listening to the Theme 2, Session 8 of the project Roadmap to Freedom. We were discussing absolute good and trying to understand which actions are relatively good and which are absolutely good. Whose property is it? Is the magic can opener. In order to determine whether the action is absolutely good or relatively good, all you have to determine is whose property it is and is the action being taken with the owner's permission or not. And there are two possible answers. One is yes and another is no. Another question is we need to answer is what is a moral action versus immoral action? Is there any agreement on the subject? Do philosophers agree on this? No. Theologists? No. There is virtually no agreement on what constitutes a moral versus an immoral action. I will give you now the definition of absolute morality, a seemingly impossible concept to devise or derive on any rational scientific basis. Nevertheless, here it is. Morality, or absolute morality, is the totality of absolute good. You can listen to that one more time. Since morality deals with the totality of volitional actions, that is, any action you choose to take, a moral action, more simply stated, is simply any volitional action that does not involve coercion. This is an absolute standard of morality. Either a man's volitional actions attack the property of another, or they don't. Either X stole an automobile or he didn't. Either Z trespassed or he didn't. Either Y robbed the bank or he didn't. There are no gray areas. Absolute morality, as defined, is a black and white concept. Now that we have an absolute standard of morality, that is moral, which is absolutely good. You can test any volitional action on any individual, anywhere, at any time, and determine where his actions, moral or immoral. Immoral is defined as not moral. And now that I have introduced you to the concept of absolute morality, or just morality, I have laid the foundation for an even more lofty concept than morality, and that is absolute rightness. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe we any time in the past we thought it's possible. Let's look at that concept. I have already said that absolute right in physics means that which is true and valid, or all the premises are true and the thought process is valid. Since that is such a useful concept, let's retain it. Here is what absolute rightness looks like in the third science, volition. We retain truth, plus we retain validity, plus we add to that the concept of absolute good. That equals absolute right for the third science called volition. And since truth and validity is the same as rationality, then absolute good is morality. The logical equivalent is that is absolutely right for the first science, volition, which is both rational and moral. Absolutely rational and moral. Absolutely right. For example, a man's actions may be completely moral, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily rational. To illustrate, a man goes to the bowling to cure his asthma. Now, assuming that he does not have a psychosomatic induced case of asthma, Further, we'll assume that the bowling alley is surrounded by a field of goldenrod and the pollen is sucked up in the air conditioner and of the bowling alley, which is aggravating his asthmatic conditions. What's the probability by going bowling that he can cure his asthma? All right. First of all, this is a relative good, right? He pays for the use of the bowling alley. Is it then an absolute good? Yeah. Therefore, his actions are moral. Are his actions rational? Is in the domain of rationality, I think you can see that his actions leave much to be desired. And so his actions are moral but not right because they are irrational. The concept of absolute rightness applied to the social structure is a complete departure from the past. Historically, the winners have always proclaimed that their views were right, absolutely right. In physics, I gave you the definition of absolute, that which is independent of arbitrary standards of measurement. For volition, we have the same concept, but we change one word, the last term, measurement. It's changed to determination. Let's hear it. In volition, an absolute is that which is independent of arbitrary standards of determination. We simply use the term determination because it's applied more effectively to volitional actions, and measurement applies more effectively to physics and non-volitional actions. All observers, for example, using the Hindu numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., will come out with a ratio of 3.141 for the concept of P. You recognize, if you look at history, that the historical standards of rightness applied to men have been, in fact, relative, though they were called absolute. Calling it absolute doesn't make it absolute. Calling something this or that name doesn't make it that. The relative standard of rightness have been imposed upon the individual either through force or fraud. Since morality is traditionally looked upon as theological subject, where does absolute morality fit into, let's say, theological morality? You're familiar with the Ten Commandments, right? Of course. One of those well-known commandments is "Thou shalt not steal." I hope everyone heard this before, right? I hope. What does that mean? Thou shalt not steal. I am for that, but what does that mean? Is there any way to know? Is there a glossary of terms that provide us with a precise definition of at least one critical term in the statement steal? What if is no precision definition for steal? What does that mean? Why am I talking about that? Everyone, you think, understands what does it mean, thou shall not steal. Government taxes, is it a steal? Or taxes for war, steal? Or church-imposed taxes, steal? There's no way to know. That presents a problem. In this advanced age of enlightenment, have you resolved all of the theological wars? Muslims and Christians shooting at each other, killing each other. Are these things still happening? Yes, of course. What is the professed theological position of the people responsible for killing the greatest number of Christians? Do you have any idea? Let me tell you something. Christians. Have not the Christian nations, gone to war for centuries, killing each other? Yes or no? Before each battle, both sides praying to the same God for victory. Does that happen? Without a foundation of precision semantics, you simply cannot have a science, which means Everybody is in the dark at what everybody is talking about on all of the subjects all of the time. This is a reason for many problems we're having. The nature of absolute morality, what constitutes a moral action versus an immoral action, that is a derivative of rationality. One of the points we'll be illustrating as this course unfolds is that rationality leads to morality. Rationality leads to morality. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Let's stop here. I gave you a lot of new concepts and definitions. I would advise to listen to this session one more time. When I was first introduced to this theory, I listened to the audio tapes given to me by Jace Nelson 3 times, from beginning to end, plus 2 or 3 times to some individual tapes that were filled with definitions and precision semantics. You can continue listening and come back to those difficult parts later. Until that time.